the largest barriers to establishing and protecting a healthy company culture? What are the hurdles that companies or teams need to get over to find that sweet spot?
You know, I think it's important that that everyone's aligned and everyone has similar values. And I know that, you know, and I'm not specifically talking about the value itself, just about the value on how people treat each other. So how, you know, if you respect your colleague, and you know, and if you treat them with respect. And I just think that generally, you know, making sure, and it's hard in larger organizations because there's a lot more people, but just getting that alignment on the values people have, I think sometimes is challenging, specifically again when you're going into companies that there's, you know, long-term employees, or there's already an existing organization and an existing team. So I think that's one of the challenges. I think the other thing is we all get super busy, and I find that I really have to take a step back, and I really have to take the time to, you know, to acknowledge people, to listen, to, you know, give them a hug, to high five them if, you know, they've done something well. And again, just trying to nurture the culture and trying to lead by examples. And I think our first intent is always just to race around. I've got a 16 million emails. I've got, you know, all these different things. And it's just to like take the time to smell the roses, right? It's just, you know, having the time to make sure people feel valued and they feel like they're contributing. And if they have an idea, yep, come on in, even though I have a million things to do. But it's just, again, taking the time to allow that culture to flourish.
Rather than force it, right? Oh, Tynan, you're...
Can you remind me of the question? I was caught up with Shioka's answer.
the biggest, what are the biggest, in your experience or opinion, the largest barriers or blockades to establishing and protecting a healthy company culture?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, for me, the one thing that I thought of when I was reading that question beforehand was that we simply don't talk about it enough. I think it's so funny how many times in organizations that I've worked with in the past, even my current one, is, and this is what I've been inspired, you know, seeing you and your company, Caleb, go through this process of the Great Game process, is that you now have times on your calendar where sort of the only thing you're going to talk about is culture. And I think that's something that across the board, if people just started to do even once a month with different teams, having, I mean, you're going to have a sales conversation, you're going to have a new product roadmap conversation, you're going to have a let's review finance, like there's going to be so many different like topics that you have meetings about. And yet it's so rare to see on someone's calendar, like how Judy will go into organizations and just observe. Sometimes I say, show me your calendar. And if there's not one meeting that has a specific focus or a meeting agenda point that says the first 25 minutes is discussing culture challenges we're going through right now, that's a barrier to having great culture. And so I think just being able to say, hey, this is a meeting that we're just setting aside, working out problems that we're having with our team, with how we communicate, with all the things that can disrupt the way our culture is great and not great. I think it's so funny how we do that with every other element of the business. But culture is this thing we think about a lot. We talk about a lot at the, you know, lunchroom. We gossip about a lot, but we don't take into our own hands and put it as a priority that we're going to spend time on to work on.
Great point.
Okay, so here would be my thoughts. I think the greatest barrier to us building and establishing culture is self-awareness, which is actually the entry into emotional intelligence. So if I liken leadership or culture to a high-performance sport, and I think about what we do in training environments with athletes where we videotape them, I do not know one leader or one organization that shows up, gets up in the morning, straps on their GoPro, walks around, sits down at night, pours a glass of wine, and goes, how'd I show up today? Yeah. And I think one of the things, so I'm building a little bit on what both you said, is when we don't pause and we don't actually watch and learn, we don't actually build a culture. Because I don't know about you, I think every one of us gets up in the morning, puts her pants on, gets ready for work, heads out the door. Well, not now. And, you know, their whole thing is around like, I'm showing up at my best,
Right.
But we get busy. And when we get busy, all this other stuff starts to show up. And so self-awareness to me becomes a bit of individually, am I aware of how am I modeling what we say we're all about? Collectively, I love your idea of like that idea when, if you show me the calendar, when and how often do you talk about it? Quite often I say to groups I work with, if you're 100% focused from a self-awareness standpoint isn't building trust, building a network or a team around yourself, I call them the kind perspective crew. If you don't have a kind perspective crew, you're hooped. Because what that does is it gives you a feedback rich environment. And if you're not getting feedback, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, there's no impact on your ability to influence, impact, performance, or results. You have no idea. We're all running blind. We're doing the best we can with what we know. And unfortunately, feedback is an F word in most organizations, as is feelings. Feelings drive the bus in our behavior. And feedback's the only way, in the absence of a video camera, that we're getting any perspective. And so without those things, I think we can talk a good game, but unless we build the practices and the processes that allow us to see, hear, and understand what's happening. So as a coach, that's what I do with a lot of groups. I go in and I just watch. Yeah. And I say, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm hearing. Is that what you want it to be? Because I think those are the kinds of things that when we become mindful and we plan for them and we talk about them, we get curious about them, we're building not only our individual self-awareness, which is the foundation for great leadership, but it's also the foundation for trust, which is actually the ground zero for teams and organizations. Mm-hmm. And then the organization itself then can grow from that space because there's a continual feedback and a learning loop.